This is the al-maidah initiative, conversation without compromise.
Because there are Christians in persecuted countries suffering under persecution, because that's happening, we in America should simply accept the lockdowns, accept the restrictions,
right.
And because people have it worse than us, therefore we shouldn't complain.
Right.
What you have some credentials on this and probably some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's overall general thinking behind, like, don't complain, just accept as it is, because we still have, better than worse places, that it's like, Turkmenistan or other North Korea, other places, and not to demand your rights. But even in Turkmenistan, like government says that we have constitutional rights to believe whatever we want to believe and have a freedom of religion, freedom of gathering, and everything. But in reality, it's not imposed by those who rule the country. We have a good laws in a sense that at least generally should provide the rights for churches and anybody to believe freely. And as a lawyer, I was fighting in the beginning actually against the breaking the law by those who rule, like a KGB or police or the local authorities trying to impose restrictions on believers. But they were always saying, actually, we have a law, but it's not for the citizens of this country. It's just for international community to show that we have these good laws, That's kind of a double standard. But I think in the U.S. is like getting into that notion is really, it's a mistake, because I think, if you start giving your rights, and it's in the Constitution of this country. I mean, U.S. especially. The founding fathers, it says that those rights were given by God, not like, given by authority or some kind of man-made authority. But it's, everybody is given, rights from the Creator, to have the freedom and, pursue happiness and live a free life. And now if we give this right to the government, then that's wrong, and I think it's going to create more issues, and we're going to give up more rights, and this country can turn into something, that third world country that violates a lot of freedoms of people.
So I'm curious to hear some of your kind of how you've thought about this through the duration of the lockdowns, because for those listening to this 350 years in the future, we're in the year 2020, and there has been immense lockdowns that have curbed every area of life, more or less. That's been businesses, that's been churches. Right now in Washington, churches are able to gather, but at 25% capacity, and we're not allowed to sing.
Wow.
Gatherings of more than 6 people outside of a house are prohibited, and the regulations have looked different at different times, right? The start of the year, the start of the outbreak of COVID-19, churches were banned from gathering entirely because of the health risk of meeting in a large gathering. So how has this year been for you? Has your thinking changed throughout the year? Have you been like, don't tell me what to do from the beginning of the year?
Yeah, I mean, that was one. It was shocking that the government was like imposing those restrictions in U.S. I mean, compared still, like, some other countries, still we have some relatively more freedom than in Turkey. Even you have to have mask while you're driving. Like in Turkmenistan, if your mask is down on your nose, then you will be penalized, stopped by police and state patrol and that kind of stuff. But still, I mean, I think when they started imposing restrictions, that was like, are we becoming like, those countries where the government intentionally, openly, violates the freedoms of their population, and they keep them under very tight control, and using police forces and other forces to impose those restrictions. And to be honest, it was like hard to accept, because I lived enough years under the most restrictive, countries. Like, I was born and grew up in Turkmenistan, and then also lived in Russia a year, experienced, total government control of every part of your life. But then here, slowly, they started just a little bit, giving some restrictions, first recommending just wear the mask. Now they're restricting that even you can't gather as a family and friends for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and putting more and more restrictions is showing that the moment we agreed in one restriction, they're going to give more restrictions, and it's kind of a testing us and seeing how much they can take control of our lives, every level. That's why I think it was ups and downs for me and our family at times. Like when the second wave, I think here in Washington, when they said we're going to do another, strict restrictions on gathering and church gatherings and even businesses and other things, I was like kind of a mad first reaction. And it seems that what they're doing is not like legitimate. Definitely Bible says that we have to obey the local authorities and everything, but are they demanding the righteous demands, or following the righteous laws of the country or not? That's the issue for me, to find that balance.
So let's dig into this. So let's go to Romans 13, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Romans 13 says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be in subjection not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. For because of this you also pay taxes, for the authorities are ministers of God, attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed." So we have that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both of us believe these are inspired words of God.
Right.
Yet we also went and ate at a restaurant right before this. We won't say which one.
Right.
So the question is, are we being hypocrites by kind of not taking this seriously, or is there something deeper going on? How do you think through this, right? You were, for those of you who haven't seen the last time Shura was on, Shura was a lawyer by nature and profession back in Turkmenistan. He was one of the leaders of the persecuted church there, several times removed from the capital city for disobeying the government, and is probably still a wanted fugitive from the government of Turkmenistan.
Mm-hmm.
These words are true of the Turkmen government, they're true of the American government. How the heck do we apply this?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, like in Turkmenistan, for example, when they demanded us not to have any gatherings, any Christian gatherings, they called it like illegal gatherings. In order to gather, according their understanding, was like you have to have a registration or government recognition And then after that, when you have registration with the government, then you can have church gatherings. But then they created the restrictions on how to get the registration and the numbers of people that needs to be on the list. And then even though you had those lists, people on the list and all your documentations, they were not registering you. And then telling you that you're doing illegal gatherings. You see that the government is imposing unjustful, unrighteous laws, and then demanding to follow those laws. And in that sense, I think we need to follow God's law, and God's people needs to gather. They needs to encourage each other and worship God, and be in the Word and learn God's Word and preach the gospel, share the gospel with other people. And that's why we decided to continue, even though they each time raided our churches and house churches and arrested or kicked us out from the capital city. We tried to come back and do gatherings, obeying God's law. When the government breaks, I think, the God's law, and then I think we have a right to obey God rather than man. Like, apostles did the same thing.
Right.
In Jerusalem, they were, Peter and John was forbidden by Jewish authorities, but they said we have to rather follow God than man. I think same in this context. If we really breaking the law and doing bad things, then we have to be fearful. But if we're doing right things, but still government persecutes us or puts restrictions on us, then we should be obeying those not lawful injustice restrictions, I think.